Good morning. It's good to see you today. Let's talk about Jesus today. Let's talk about who Jesus was not. In Matthew chapter 9, at verse 29, the account is you have two blind men crying out, "Son of David, have mercy on us," verse 27. Jesus says to them in verse 28, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" They said to him, "Yes, Lord." And he touched their eyes, saying, "According to your faith, let it be to you." And their eyes were opened. I want you to think about, Jesus says, "According to your faith." The Lord did not heal everybody. He did not do it. He had the power to do it, but he did not do it. He says, "According to your faith, let it be." In a blink of an eye, the Lord could have taken away every disease upon the face of the earth. He had that power. But he did not heal everybody. You would have to argue whether or not the Lord healed anybody who was not a disciple. He says, "According to your faith, let it be." You might think about that. The second thing that the Lord was not and did not do, in John chapter 6, after the feeding of the 5,000, verse 26, he says, "Most assuredly," because all kinds of people had followed him, but for the wrong reasons. He says, "Most assuredly I say to you, you seek me not because you saw the signs, but because you ate of the loaves and were filled. Do not labor for the food which perishes, but for the food which endures to everlasting life." Jesus was not a traveling food pantry. These folks, they were following Jesus, and they wanted Jesus to just keep popping out bread and fish. He wasn't going to do it. They were following him for the wrong reasons. He was not a traveling food pantry. He told them to stop pursuing that food, to stop, as it says, laboring for the food that perishes, that they needed to be more spiritually minded than that, and they needed to labor for the food that endured to everlasting life. He was not a food pantry. Also, Jesus did not tolerate, as our third point, Jesus did not tolerate vain worship. In Mark chapter 7, in Mark 7, at verse 7, he says, and it's a quote from the Old Testament, "In vain they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men." Right? Teaching as doctrines the commandments of men. He did not tolerate vain worship. He did not tolerate casual worship. This is Jesus who cleansed the temple, who actually kept people from coming into the temple, carrying their wares through the temple. They were treating something holy like it was something common, and he did not tolerate it. And he condemned vain worship filled with man's doctrine. He did not tolerate it, right? They may have been sincere, but it was not tolerated because it was not from the Lord. Our fourth point we want to mention, in Luke chapter 23, before Jesus went to the cross, it mentions Herod wanting to see him. At verse 20, in Luke chapter 23, at verses 8 and 9, it says, "Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad, for he desired for a long time to see him, because he had heard many things about him, and he hoped to see some miracle done by him. He questioned Jesus with many words, but he answered nothing." Namely, Jesus was not an entertainer. Right? All sorts of folks have this idea that Jesus was just going around and it was almost like this show. The Lord was not an entertainer, and he was not going to dance for Herod. And he answered nothing. Think about it, think about these things, and make an application to today. Hope you enjoyed this study. God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow morning.